Well, thanks for your patience today. We're getting stuff together because the world changes as we're watching. It's incredible what's happening right now. Like Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, I give him lots of respect because I probably wrote 500 columns in support of his presidency in 2016 and 2020 and 2024. But I don't know what he's up to right now. He's left the G7 conference, and what is he up to? Well, I'm hearing sources say that he could be up to joining the war in Iran. What I suggested yesterday, and we'll be right back with this very shortly, is that he should be doing something, possibly something very different.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, and here, have a look.
Mr. President! Mr. President! Mr. President, will you take our questions? Take our questions.
Hey, so what was that all about? Now, early this morning, I predicted this was about a peace conference because Donald Trump was not very specific about it, but he said he might be going back to deal with the problems in the Middle East. Now, that could mean two things. Either they're working for a ceasefire or they're working for a permanent process of peace. And this is what I have been advocating on this station. We need to stop the wars in the Middle East and in Ukraine, because if they continue to isolate, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's why I think Donald Trump is going back to Washington, D.C. right now. And as we speak, at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:13, as I say this to you, I think Donald Trump is considering what his options are. We have never been closer to nuclear war than we are right now, except perhaps the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. Never been closer. So, what does that mean for us? I was on a radio station yesterday. I'll tell you this, just an aside. CKNW, it used to call itself Top Dog, used to be the biggest station in BC. And I was on that station yesterday. They wanted me to comment on whether or not Canada should purchase the F-35s. And I said, of course they should. Stephen Harper should have purchased the F-35s 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm sorry, it goes back that far. Literally 18 years ago. Stephen Harper should have purchased the F-35s. Because by the time we get them, we're going to be looking at a fifth generational fighter jet. That's what happens when you delay your defense spending. And it's not just the liberals who do it. The conservatives do it. And I'm disgusted that the conservatives would be out there this week saying, this had to happen. We would never have bought them at that price. Yeah, you had 9 years to buy them at the reduced price, and you didn't. You did nothing. You sat on those fighter jets for 9 years. Does this mean I'm pro-liberal? No, because the liberals do the same crap every year. I'm pro-defense, and we have never been pro-defense in this country, possibly going back to Louis Saint Laurent, a liberal prime minister, who actually put money into national defense for Canada, not for Europe, because Mark Carney wants to spend $225 billion Canadian rearming Europe. That's what Mark Carney is all about. That's a disaster in waiting. Who gave us 2 world wars? Europe did. Do you want a 3rd world war? Well, that's what Keir Starmer is working for, and that's what Emmanuel Macron is working for, respectively, the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the President of France. That's what they're working for. They really think they can win a war with Russia? With what? Nothing? They have nothing left in their defense arsenal. So we're talking about this, and we have to keep. Here's some more great moments from the G7 conference.
Have anticipated these massive changes and are taking bold measures to address them. All of us around this table are reinforcing our militaries and security services for the new world. But we all know that there can be no security without economic prosperity, and no prosperity without resilience. And in a world where shocks flow across the borders, that resilience comes from cooperation around that starts around.
Want to have Russia in, and I would say that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in, and you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago. But it didn't work out that way. But it used to be the G8, and now it's, I guess, what's that, 8 years ago, it switched over. They threw Russia out, which I claimed was a very big mistake. Even though I wasn't in politics then, I was very loud about it. It was a mistake in that you spend so much time talking about Russia, and he's no longer at the table, so it makes life more complicated. But you wouldn't have had the war.
Okay, I don't know if they would have had the war or not, but I'll tell you this. How can you possibly ignore Russia at a G8 conference? That's where it should have been. Do you think Vladimir Putin is less a dictator than Zelensky? Do you think you think Trump is less a dictator than a lot of other plutocratic states out there? It's crap. And we keep getting hit with this, like, oh, we have to ostracize Russia. We have to treat them as a pariah state. Let me tell you this, folks, and I remember this very well. Back in 1991, when the Soviet Union imploded, 2 years after the Berlin Wall fell, we all said, this is our chance to get together as a world country, not in terms of the United Nations, but getting along together. We no longer have to worry about nuclear war being on the horizon. And what has the United States done since then? They've tried to totally eliminate, ostracize, marginalize the former Soviet Union as Russia. Because they're not communists anymore. Go to Russia and you'll find out that there is a vibrant middle class. They want to be part of the West. But people like, shall we say it, Mark Carney, don't want that. And the idiots like Derek Burney, who today said Vladimir Putin is more of a dictator than anybody else. No, I'm sorry, Derek Burney, you don't have any comprehension of foreign affairs. You never have. And God only knows why Brian Mulroney used you as a chief of staff. But you don't get it. It's time to embrace Russia as a member of the world community. Why? because otherwise we're going to have a nuclear war. And this is what could happen in the Middle East. And believe me, I got stuck with this yesterday. So many people said, don't talk about Israel. You know nothing about Israel. Well, actually, I spent 2 months there during my time as a university student on a kibbutz. I love Israel. I think Israel's gone off the rails right now because they're killing people in Gaza at a rate that is astounding and actually competes with the people who were killing them at a rate back in the 1930s and 40s. And I don't think I have to mention who that was. Anyway, we are going to go to our next clip here because I tell you,
and a whole buffet of media manipulation served up by none other than Global Affairs Canada. Because if there's one thing Mark Carney's team is good at, it's making sure the press is only free when they're pre-approved. To see all of our coverage from here on the ground, go to g7reports.com. But the G7, in case you've forgotten, is a closed-door club of the world's richest democracies, where the leaders plot global policy over catered lunches and climate platitudes. But let me show you how this informs us that the Canada-US bilateral meeting at 9 a.m. is open to all media. Wow, what a rare moment of transparency, right? Except there's one problem. That email, it hit inboxes at 8:14 in the morning. And where was this media happening? At the Sinclair Room in Kananaskis. Now, unless you're already a CBC reporter camping under the Prime Minister's chair, you're not getting there in time from anywhere else. The media center is here in Banff, nearly an hour away. Some journalists are in Calgary. That's about the same distance. However, I was in Canmore and I could have made it. I was on my way, but wait for it. They changed the rules nearly at the security gate. Hi, I'm great.
Good.
I'm a journalist. Yes, but they're not going to let me in anyway because they switched it from general to pooled last minute. So
right.
Nothing like Global Affairs and their competence. Anyway, I'll whip a Yui and
go a little bit further for the user.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. At the last minute, Global Affairs pulled the old switcheroo and sent an email only admitting pooled media. That means your tax-funded state broadcaster, CBC, and the usual suspects, BBC, Reuters, CNN. You know, the ones who never ask questions that normal people care about. The same folks who couldn't spot a Carney scandal with both hands and a search warrant. You see, Global Affairs plays this little gaslighting game where they technically accredit independent journalists like me after a threatened lawsuit and a last-minute court date, and then they stash us in the media center in Banff, an hour away from the action, while the world leaders are tucked away in Kananaskis. You can see details of our lawsuit against the federal government at letusreport.com. But like I said, we're here in Banff with no access, no questions, no accountability, just a press pass and a polite middle finger. And all of this is happening as current U.S. President Donald Trump makes his presence known here in Alberta. His appearance comes amid surging desire in this province to leave Canada altogether and maybe even join the United States. Can you imagine the look on Mark Carney's face if someone like me dared to ask Trump about Alberta independence while cameras were rolling? No wonder they only let the boring pooled media in. Now, I don't want to attribute malice where stupidity and bureaucratic incompetence will do, but let's be honest. This government has a proven track record of maliciously excluding Rebel News from press conferences and public events. Maybe this was just Global Affairs bungling the single most important press conference of the entire summit, Carney and Trump on Alberta soil. Who knows? Either way, incompetence or censorship, the result is still the same at the end of the day. No real media, no real questions, no real accountability. You know, for all the flack Donald Trump gets from the media, he opened the White House briefing room to everyone, podcasters, YouTubers, bloggers. Heck, if you had a mic and questions, you were in. But over in Kananaskis, at a summit run by Carney's globalist gang, transparency means let CBC handle it. They'll edit out anything that's uncomfortable for the government. Meanwhile, we're left in the parking lot of democracy with our press passes and a police escort telling us to go back to Banff and mind our own business. This G7 isn't just about climate or trade or world peace. It's about control of who gets to speak, control of what gets covered, and most of all, at the end of the day, that means control of you. If you want real coverage from people who aren't bought or paid for or afraid, go to G7 Report.
For that, Sheila Gunn Reid. And why did I show you that? Because we're going to have the publisher of this newscast of Rebel News, an old friend of mine. We go back literally, my God, how long has it been? 25 years. Yes, 1999 we first met. Ezra Levant will be on to discuss how they've got the right, how Rebel News got the right to report this, because I can't be there either as an independent news agency or as a member of the new media, because I report for Human Events and the Post Millennial and Blaze Media, none of which the Prime Minister's office recognizes as real journalism. You have to be on his side to be recognized as real journalism. Let's watch a bit of question period, and after which we'll bring Ezra on to talk about not only how they beat them again, Rebel News has beat the government again, but we'll be talking about Bill C-2, the most poison pill piece of legislation in front of the government. And the Conservatives have to be more pronounced about it. And yes, I admit Michelle Rempel Garner has criticized it. We need to see more than that.
Questions orales, oral questions. The honourable member for Thornhill.
The Prime Minister is at the G7 today, surrounded by allies in the largest oil-producing province in the Federation. But thanks to the Liberal government, the oil and gas products they're demanding are still in the ground, and instead of powering our economy and Canadian paychecks. We've got laws blocking extraction, a cap that halts production, a shipping ban that stops it from leaving, and an industrial carbon tax that makes it all more expensive to build. Will the Liberals repeal our anti-energy laws and approve projects so that we can get jobs for our people and our resources to market?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Speaker, what this government will do is pass the One Canadian Economy Act to get the economy going again.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Here's the problem. As the G7 begins, the world may find out what Canadians have known for years. The Liberal laws still in place make it nearly impossible to get anything built. The Prime Minister's solution is not to fix the problem. Instead, he wants to give hall passes to the very few favoured VIPs to skip the line while everyone else waits. C-69, the emissions cap, the shipping ban, the industrial carbon tax, those are all still on the books. Everyone knows the laws are broken and we need to exempt projects for them. So why not just repeal the laws, period?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Speaker, what my honourable colleagues should know is that the CEOs of the energy companies, the union workers, the rig workers are all supporting the One Canadian Economy Act. So it would be really great if they got on board as well.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Please leave it in the ground. Liberals keep blocking resource projects, giving more dollars to dictators. Radical Liberal policies are costing Canadian jobs and keeping our clean, responsible Canadian resources out of the hands of our allies. With the G7 now under the way, will this Prime Minister put aside his radical climate agenda to make sure that Canadian resources get into the hands of our allies?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, we've been clear, and I will repeat it once again. We are going to keep working to make sure Canada is an energy superpower. To do that, we need to be low risk, low cost, and low carbon. Build a strong Canadian economy. I hope the Conservatives will be able to help support us.
Bravo. The Honourable Calgary East.
Canada can't become energy independent until bad Liberal policies are repealed. The Prime Minister even admits that his own policies are what's not letting anything get built in this country. He even wants to give premiers veto over pipelines, ensuring that Americans get Canadian product at a fire sale price. With the world gathering in Alberta today, will the Prime Minister repeal his anti-energy laws so our allies can get more Canadian product? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Speaker, the answer is clear. If Canada wants to be an energy superpower, We need to do it in a smart way, and that is to make sure it's low risk, low cost, and low carbon. The Conservatives were unable to build anything because they didn't do environmental assessments. They didn't consult with Indigenous peoples. We're not going to follow the way they did things because that didn't get things done. We're going to get things done right.
L'honorable député de Louis.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent Akanawak. Mr. Speaker, we're receiving the G7 countries right now, and Canada is in last place when it comes to resource development. For 10 years, this Liberal government has been anti-energy and anti-natural resources. The disastrous Bill 69 gave the federal government the right to veto hydrogen and electricity. We would have never been able to develop Manic, James Bay, or Remain. When will the government repeal C69? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, I share with my colleague, we went through an election campaign together. We went through page 1 of our platform, and it indicated that we were going to pass a bill to have a single Canadian economy to make it easier to get major projects across the finish line. And that has the support of business, the unions, the premiers all across the country. Mr. Speaker, let's move the Canadian economy together. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent Akanawak. The Liberals have a short memory because they passed 4 anti-energy and anti-resource bills. There's not just C69, there's C48 and the shipping ban, there's the cap on oil and gas production, which is killing jobs, and the industrial carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, more than ever, people need more Canada. When will the minister make this possible? The Honourable Government House Leader. While respecting the environment and Indigenous rights and procedures, that's what a responsible government does. But we do know that we need to proceed now to implement major projects, including projects in Quebec and in all provinces and territories. We're going to do that respectfully, but effectively and efficiently. We're going to get our workers to work. We're going to get our economy moving. By the
recent Auditor General's report revealed that GC strategies.
Germany is a captive of Russia because they supply. They got rid of their coal plants. They got rid of their nuclear. They're getting so much of the oil and gas from Russia. I think it's something that NATO has to look at. I think it's very inappropriate. You and I agree that it's inappropriate. I don't know what you can do about it now, but it certainly doesn't seem to make sense that they pay billions of dollars to Russia, and now we have to defend them against Russia.
You know, NATO is an alliance of 29 nations, and there are sometimes differences and different views and also some disagreements. And the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany is one issue where allies disagree. But the strength of NATO is that despite this, we are stronger together than apart.
But how can you be together when a country is getting its energy from the person you want protection against or from the group that you want protection?
Because we understand that when we stand together also when dealing with Russia, we are stronger. I think what we have seen is that...
No, you're just making Russia richer. Well, you're not dealing with Russia, you're making Russia richer.
So I think that even during the Cold War, NATO allies were trading with Russia. Then there have been disagreements about what kind of trade arrangements we should go into.
I think trade is wonderful. I think energy is a whole different story. I think energy is a much different story than normal trade. And you have a country like Poland that won't accept the gas. You take a look at some of the countries, they won't accept it because they don't want to be captive to Russia. But Germany, as far as I'm concerned, is captive to Russia because it's getting so much of its energy from Russia. So we're supposed to protect Germany, but they're getting their energy from Russia. Explain that. And it can't be explained, you know that.
And that's why Donald Trump left this group. That's why Donald Trump decided to go, because he could no longer tolerate what was going on here. And I think this is a lesson. So where are we going from this? And this is what I have to ask the question of you viewers. Where are we going from here? Is this going to be a peace conference? Because I did an interview yesterday on the top station in British Columbia. I used to listen to it all the time. Talk News was great. CKNW. What was on Mike Smith's show in the afternoon. And he said, "Well, what do you think should happen right now in world affairs?" And I said, "You believe me, what should happen is a peace conference, not a conference about the G7 who think they still run the world and they don't. It's over. For BRICS runs the world in terms of countries who are joining up. And for 7 countries to insist they still run the world, it's incredible. And this is why Donald Trump is saying, invite Russia back, because we should not look at Russia as a pariah state. The longer we do that, the less chance we have of peace in this world. And I honestly don't know what they are thinking. But so I'm just buying some time here and see if we can get Ezra is not joining us. But we'll give him a couple of minutes and see what happens here. Because we did say 26 minutes after the hour. No, we're all. But here's what we need to do, folks, is focus on what's really important. And what's really important is not a G7 conference. What's really important is focusing on how the world can eliminate the possibility of a nuclear war. And that's what's happening right now. And that's what absolutely frightens me, is we could be wandering into that. Let's go back to Michelle Rempel for a few minutes, and we'll see what happens.
Company was paid a whopping $64.5 million tax dollars by the Liberal government to do literally nothing. Think about how Canadians struggling to make ends meet feel about having to pay massive taxes just to enrich Liberal insiders. It's like reverse Robin Hood. Will the Liberals support our motion to get Canadians' money back from these scammers, or will they keep robbing Canadians to pay their friends?
The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me be absolutely clear, we will never tolerate any misbehavior or misconduct from our suppliers or their subcontractors. We've taken legal actions against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP because we will always defend the integrity of our procurement system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Not only are the Liberals tolerating this behavior, they're promoting the people who oversaw it. In the normal world, somebody who would have overseen $65 million going to scammers would have been fired. But instead, these ministers have been promoted. And today we found out that these ministers want to give even more money to consultants to manage web pages. Why is it with these Liberals, incompetent politicians get promoted while Canadian taxpayers get stuck with the bill?
The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I've mentioned time and time again last week, we will always defend the integrity of our procurement system, and we will always hold bad actors to account, which is why, Mr. Speaker, of the company she's mentioned, we've revoked its security clearance. We've terminated all contracts more than a year ago. We've put in place the Office of Supplier Integrity, which has barred GC Strategies from contracting with the government for 7 years. We've taken legal actions against the company. We've referred cases to the RCMP. We will always hold responsible suppliers and their subcontractors who misconduct. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Member for Provencher.
Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General confirmed GC Strategies, a two-person company, got $64 million from the Liberals, often without competitive bidding. In nearly half the contracts, there's no proof of even any work being done. In 82% of cases, departments didn't check if taxpayers were overpaying, and in 50% contracts, security clearances were not properly enforced, including departments like Global Affairs and National Defence. A total collapse of basic oversight, but taxpayers are still forced to pay, while Liberal insiders get rich. Will every member in this House vote to get Canadians their money back?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
And we will
mic issue here. I just got word back from Ezra at Rebel News. They're having a little bit of a emergency at the news station. So we will get back to that. We will get back to that later today. And thank you so much for your patience. If we don't do that interview at 4 o'clock, we'll do it tomorrow because Ezra has been really attacked, and he tells me that they've been attacked right now, and they've got to deal with things because they just are unable to do what they need to do. And we will get back to Ezra later today because Rebel News is one of the true broadcasting originals in this country. And I'm not here to tell you support them, support me, but I support them in any way I can. I think they've always been a fantastic station, and Ezra has always been a good friend of this station and a good friend of freedom. And that's what's important. So we will be back. But before we do that, remember the merchandise. Thanks for watching today, folks. We will be back again later today or tomorrow with more of the news you need to know. Thanks for watching. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today and such a pleasure to be here. God bless this country and Godspeed. Godspeed to all of you.